I'd like to thank all the troopers out there for hanging on this long. It's been a long and interesting day, and I appreciate you sticking around, and we'll make this worth your while. I say will because I am here with Ken Harris, who's the president of Cesca. As Jason mentioned, I'm the CEO of Cesca Therapeutics. And so thank you very much for being here. We appreciate it. The silver lining to being the last presenter at a conference like this, I think, is that you get an opportunity to see the trends and the themes that are emerging from the companies that have presented before you. And as I look back on the day, the themes that have emerged are very encouraging to me when we think about our go-to-market strategy. And I'll get into more of that in a moment. But when you look back on the day and you think about how GE pointed out that process control in regenerative medicine is extremely important, controlling all the variables as you go through the development, the engineering, and then the delivery of these regenerative medicine therapies. NeoStem talked about the importance of having effective therapies and being able to demonstrate statistical significance, go big or go home, because the cost of developing these therapies in most instances is significant. And then perhaps at lunch, the keynote speaker taking us through what I would say, after I heard it, are the key success criteria for being in the regenerative medicine market and successfully commercializing these therapies. He talked about having a commercialization strategy, having a regulatory pathway understood, and a strategy to navigate the evolving regulatory landscape. He talked about having a manufacturing strategy. That's something Linda at Capricorn also raised her hand and said, we know this is important stuff, and if you're focused on it as a company, you've got a much better chance of being successful. They also talked about needing multiple shots on goal, a number of products to be able to bring to the market. So I'd just like you, as we walk through this, to keep those in mind, because I think when you see the Cesca go-to-market strategy and the business model, you'll find that we have a very unique approach, and we check the box on all of these essential success criteria. So who is Cesca? Cesca, as Jason just mentioned, was formed actually in February of this year when we got approval from our shareholders for merging Totipotent and Thermogenesis together. Thermogenesis has a long history of having engineered cell processing devices. We design them, we envision them, we design them, we bring them to market, and we've got experience in bringing multiple products into the market, primarily through the cord blood business, which is essentially our base business. Totipotent, on the other hand, has been focused on the biological and clinical engineering of cell therapies for the past 7 years. They're a private company, we're a public company. Bringing the two together, we believe, brings together, as I said before, a unique and perhaps, in our mind, the only fully integrated regenerative medicine company that is autologous based. We have a CRO, we have the ability to engineer the tools necessary, and as we walk through this, you're going to see how, as I mentioned, we nail, I think, all of the success criteria. So real quickly, because time is of the essence here, green button. I will be making forward-looking statements, so please refer to our SEC documents. Real quickly, I just want to start with Thermogenesis, a little bit of background here, real quickly. What's important about our background that we bring to this merger is we have put, as I said, probably half a dozen products into the market, and we have, our technologies have been used to process over 600,000 cord blood samples. So we are near Six Sigma quality with the production of our technologies that are in the market, so we understand when we go into the point of care how important it is to maintain that level of quality. So we come into this with a lot of experience. We also have intellectual property protection around our products and a lot of experience in the market. Let's take a quick look at Totipotent. Toti has, for the past 7 years, been using our technology We're not strangers to one another. They've been a distributor and a partner of ours for the past 5 years. And so they've been taking our technologies into the operating room with their clinical staff, and they have used our technology for cell therapies in over 600 patients. And in doing so, they've developed phase 1 and pilot trial results in 8 different indications with very compelling results that they bring to this merger. They also have a very important relationship with Fortis Hospital that they inked about 3 years ago. They are the exclusive provider of cell therapies to Fortis Hospital. That is not an artist's rendering up there of that hospital. That's the real thing. And it is state-of-the-art. Fortis Hospitals is the largest private chain in the world, in Asia, and they've got 72 hospitals. They represent for us a tremendous inpatient population for the trials that we want to run. And since we have an embedded CRO in that facility by virtue of Totipotent's CRO, a bio-CRO, we have the ability to take our clinical, the clinical therapies that we're developing through the clinical process and into commercialization 100% ourselves, and we do that through that Totipotent relationship. As you can see on the far right, a little bit small numbers, one of the keys about this is that we have a significant Asian infrastructure through our office in New Delhi, and we have been able to, with those 8 trials, only invest about $2.5 million to bring the pilot and the phase 1 trials to completion. And we've designed those with U.S. clinicians in conjunction with the FDA to make sure that when we completed those, we could leverage that in bringing our therapies into phase 2 and 3 in other areas of the world, including the U.S. But what that would have cost us in the U.S. was about $17 million. So there's like a 5, we're basically leveraging through, and we have an anti-dilutive funding mechanism by being able to do our trials early through our Asian infrastructure. So that's a significant advantage for us as we try to bring things to market quickly. So if I go back and I look at, and just try to take you through at the 30,000 foot level, this is a very rudimentary slide, but I wanted to stay very high level to make sure that when you left, it was easier to just understand how Cesca is different and how we checked the box on all of those success criteria. I would say that this is a depiction of our go-to-market strategy. On the left is a depiction of the corporate strategy, and the right would really be the effect of that corporate go-to-market strategy on our product platform. On the left, you can see that we are autologous-based, so we have all of our therapies we're doing at the point of care in 60 to 90 minutes using a patient's cells from beginning to end. We're done. The cells don't go out of the operating room. There's no manipulation. So those 2 characteristics allow us to ensure that it's safe, and we've demonstrated that in our pilot and phase 1 studies. And moreover, that gives us the quickest regulatory pathway to approval. When you look at what I just went through with regard to what we collectively bring to this, the 2 companies, we have a demonstrated capability to conceive of these therapies, develop the tools internally, understand the use of those tools, and like we talked about in terms of success factors, having done this in over 600 patients and having successfully developed the formula and the protocols necessary to ensure that we get the right cells in the right quantity and that they're effective every time, that's the control of all the variables across the spectrum that we're talking about. And we can do that in 60 to 90 minutes at the point of care. So as you go to the right, you can see that having autologous cells minimally manipulated, safe, we got regulatory tailwinds, and being able to do this in 60 to 90 minutes with our proven technologies, we have low cost of goods. And typically people think of autologous cells as being expensive to bring to market. And we think we have the formula to do it inexpensively, not only the development through our Asian infrastructure, but also the delivery at the point of care. We're talking about being able to deliver our CLI therapy or our AMI therapy for thousands of dollars, not tens of thousands of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars. And lastly, as you'll see when Ken presents here, that our early results are clearly demonstrating that our therapies are safe, but they're very compelling with regard to the early efficacy. So when you look at how these stack up, if you're looking at this as an equation or a formula, we think that this go-to-market strategy gives us rapid cell therapy development capabilities to produce scalable blockbuster therapies. So before turning it over to Ken, this is just a summary of our clinical pipeline. He'll take us through where we are with regard to our pipeline, the two areas that we're focused on in the near term and that we've recently secured some funding to launch, our AMI trial, which we're taking into a phase 1B, and our CLI trial, which we're taking into a pivotal phase, which he'll take us through. We also have early data from pilots in phase 1 in 6 other indications, and we're also making progress towards a 510K for a bone marrow transplant program that I'll turn it over now to Ken to talk us through.
To keep everyone awake at this point, I'm going to go quickly to clinical data and then explain our product. So show you the results and then come back to how we actually get these results. So we announced in January of 2014 our phase 1B or feasibility study for our CLI results, which are in no-option patients, meaning these patients have exhausted all surgical intervention and traditional or standard of care medicine. So we took those patients when they were near-term leg amputation, enrolled them in the trial, 17 of them, treating them with our SurgeWorks process, which is an integration of multiple devices, an optimized anticoagulation process, and we monitored them over a 12-month period. And what resulted was that we achieved our safety endpoint. We had only minor adverse events, and most of these patients are considered train wrecks already. They have very severe cardiovascular disease in their brain and in their heart and throughout their limbs. All of the patients except for 2 survived to the end of the study at the 12-month endpoint, and today still all of the patients that survived and had their legs, 82.4% of them kept their legs at 12 months, still have their legs 1.5 years post the study finishing. Where we are with the program is we did the feasibility. We were not sure whether it was going to be, what regulatory path it was ultimately going to take. Was it a combination IND? Was it a BLA or was it an IDE? And we now have the feedback that it is an IDE PMA path. So as of today, this morning, we filed for our pivotal trial discussion with the FDA. All of the rules for IDEs changed about 4 weeks ago. So basically, the IDE application has to be in prior to any discussion with the FDA now. And so we submitted that this morning. So we have plans to be in our pivotal trial, which will be 127 patients beginning in the 4th quarter of this year. Multi-site trial of 20 sites. We also took this proof of principle and wanted to go into the heart. Our mechanism of actions, I'm not going to go into in this presentation, but our mechanism of actions are really revascularization. And we took it into the heart just as we had done in the limb. The heart is much more complicated, and delivering our processed cells, the autologous processed cells, through an intracoronary delivery path into the heart. We only got permission to do 1 patient in a pilot study early on. We followed that patient post-treatment at 24 months, and to our surprise, where we were expecting in the desired results and others, to see probably about a 5% ejection fraction improvement. This patient who was his ejection fraction was 36% on enrollment 4 days post-MI, and a patient who has an ejection fraction below 40 to 45%, 3 days post-MI has an 80% mortality rate in 1 year. So we took this patient who was near death, young guy in his 40s, treated him with our SurgeWorks process, and 24 months later, his ejection fraction is back to 60%. He's normal and living a normal life. So we're now moving that on to seek phase 2 approval for doing a 30-patient randomized placebo-controlled trial, which we hope to have permission to begin also in the 4th quarter of this year. The third initiative is our bone marrow transplant program, and this is really the combination of the marriage of our two companies now. The two studies we did before we did while we were dating in partnership, but leveraging both of our capabilities now. This is the first clinical program to come out of the marriage. Bone marrow transplant, in particular in pediatrics, is a very troubling area of medicine. More than 50% of patients who need a bone marrow transplant for hematology reasons or oncology reasons can't get them mostly they can't find a match. But if you can find a match, the second problem in bone marrow transplant is the mortality rates. And focusing, we found two areas that we can make a difference in this particular market segment. The first one is in pediatric bone marrow transplant. And if you look across the U.S., there are 156 bone marrow transplant centers that do pediatric bone marrow, and only 9% of those BMT centers are considered super sites, meaning that they have mortality rates above the 50% or survival rates above the 50% range, only 9%. Why is that? Well, one of the reasons is because they have a very hard time going through the cell processing and taking a large amount of donor material, concentrating it down, cleaning it and purifying it, and retaining enough stem cells that they get an engraftment quick enough for the patient to survive. So we've launched a new program using our same point-of-care technology that takes bone marrow. It's a smart system. It sees inside the cells and can remove all of the plasma proteins, and red blood cell contaminants and get us a highly concentrated stem cell fraction, small enough for a pediatric patient. And we can do that without needing to do additional washing steps, which the labs are doing now. We can do that in 1 hour. Today it takes around 8 hours in a laboratory facility, and through the multiple washing steps they have to use, they lose more than 50% of the stem cells. Therefore, many of the patients don't engraft. We're now 40% into our clinical trial. We're seeing engraftment rates tracking to the super site levels in the U.S. So we're seeing engraftments happening at the 20-day point for platelets, which would be expected. So we're very encouraged there. And what we do is actually take the most severe ABO mismatch patients, enroll them in the trial because they have no option for finding a match, and we run them through our process. We deplete out all of the antigens and the antibodies that would create a mismatch, and then we infuse them into the pediatric patient. We anticipate completing the study in the early summertime and then proceeding to a 510(k) application for our process. The second indication for both adults and children is not only is there ABO mismatching, but there's HLA mismatching. And in HLA mismatch, you have a serious problem where most patients can't find a matched unrelated donor in the world. Only 50% of Caucasians can find a match. 10% of African Americans or people of African origin can find a match, and only 5% of people of Asian origin can find a bone marrow match. So what we're doing is taking the concept of haploidentical matching, which means you only take a 50% matched unit, and you remove all of the cells in the bone marrow unit itself that would cause rejection. And so we go through this complex process of removing those cells and doing that with a combination of our technology and Miltenyi's, and are able within about 6 hours to complete a unit from a parent, which has only 50% of the genetic code of the child or a sibling, and give them access to a bone marrow transplant. And so we're finishing that clinical trial probably by the fall time. We're doing 10 patients, and we also are seeking 510(k) enrollment for that, or approval for that. What are our systems? They're patient-friendly, they're physician-friendly, they're very easy to use in the operating theater. As Matt mentioned, they can be done in 60 minutes, but this is where the difference is. Not only do we use autologous cells, but we have basically built a pharmaceutical system in a box. So all of the quality control and all the assurance that you're meeting a dose threshold and a potency threshold are integrated into our processing control. So we basically go through, we collect the cells in a specified type of anticoagulant with a specific device that harvests the bone marrow stem cells from the iliac crest. Then we put them through our SMART system where we select out the right stem cells. We online do diagnostics, so we rapidly diagnose that we have the right stem cells present in the right quantity after processing them, and then we reinfuse them through the right delivery devices. And we just recently signed a new delivery device collaboration agreement with Cook Medical, and Cook is developing our sophisticated intracoronary catheter device for our cardiac process. So we're very excited about that collaboration. All of this is done in the cath lab or in the operating room in 60 minutes. This just shows you that we've taken a very complex pharmaceutical company and put it into a box, and the physician can use that very easily. So with that, I'll turn it back to Matt to discuss the rest of the business.
All right, we're getting the hook here, so I'll just run through a couple quick things. We have good intellectual property protection, and we have experience, as I mentioned before, in actually commercializing products. We have a base business, so we know what it's like to take something from concept into the market. Real quickly, the sweet spot for us from a regulatory standpoint is you use autologous cells. To the extent that you don't have to manipulate them, you're going to go to the right on the risk curve. And if they can be homologous, and on top of that, you have essentially minimized the risk as much as possible. And most of our therapies are on the right side of this chart. News flow creates value. We understand that. Obviously, meaningful news. We think we have a slate of significant clinical milestones in front of us in 2014 and 2015 with regard to following through on the initiatives that Ken just mentioned and went through. Quick snapshot of the company. About $60 million in market capitalization, and as the gentleman 2 presentations prior to me said about his company, that there was a lot of opportunity for value creation and upside. I would say the same for our company at $64 million. We have 32 million shares outstanding and no debt, and I think a pretty strong balance sheet. And we've mentioned as part of putting the 2 companies together and creating Cesca, we thought we needed $20 million in growth capital early on to progress our clinical initiatives that Ken just outlined. We did close a financing in January for just under $7 million, so that gets us jump-started. And I think another 15 or so will get us to where we have progressed these milestones to a point where we will have created incremental value. Strong management team. And again, lastly, when you think about what the success criteria are, I think we have a unique way of checking the box on all of those to rapidly bring new blockbuster cell therapies to the market in multiple indications.
Terrific. Thank you so much. It's tough being the last speaker. Thanks for hanging in there. Everybody, I hope you enjoyed today. Thank you so much.